We assert again, in full confidence, that there does not exist a professional wizard, either of the North, South, or West, who can compete with anything approaching success with these untutored, naked sons of the East. These require no Egyptian hall for their performances, nor any preparations or rehearsals, but are ever ready at a moment's notice to evoke to their help the hidden powers of nature, which for European prestidigitators, as well as for scientists, are a closed book. In presenting the life and teachings of the masters of the Far East, I wish to state that I was one of a research party of 11 persons that visited the Far East in 1894. During our stay, 3.5 years, we contacted the great masters of the Himalayas, who aided us in the translation of the records, which was of great assistance in our research work. They permitted us to enter into their lives intimately, and we were thus able to see the actual working of the great law as demonstrated by them. We call them masters, which is merely our name for them. One living the life described herein is entitled to reverence and consideration as a master. Records and manuscripts, our actual experience with the masters, were preserved. Personally, at that time, I thought the world was not ready for this message. I was an independent member of the research party, and I am now publishing my notes under the title Life and Teachings of the Masters of the Far East, with the thought that the reader may accept or reject as he wishes. This book, which will be followed by others of the Sun series, gives the first year's experience of the expedition in relation to the masters. It includes their teaching, which was taken by us stenographically at the time with their permission and approved by them. The masters accept that Buddha represents the way to enlightenment, but they clearly set forth that Christ is enlightenment, or a state of consciousness for which we are all seeking, the Christ light of every individual, therefore, the light of every child that is born into the world. Signed, Bayard T. Spalding. In an extended description of the religious rites, monastic life, and superstitions of the Siamese, de la Lobère cites among other things the wonderful power possessed by the Taliban, the monks or the holy men of Buddha, over wild beasts. The Taliban of Siam, he says, will pass whole weeks in the dense woods under a small awning of branches and palm leaves, and never make a fire in the night to scare away the wild beasts, as all other people do who travel through the woods of this country. The people consider it a miracle that no Taliban is ever devoured. The tigers, elephants, and rhinoceroses with which the neighborhood abounds respect him, and travelers placed in secure ambuscade have often seen these wild beasts lick the hands and the feet of the sleeping Taliban. They all use magic, as the French gentleman, and thinks all nature animated and souled. They believed in tutelar geniuses. Masters of the Far East, Volume 1, page 12. I then began to ask questions, and Emil showed me that he was able to call the birds to him and direct their flight while they were in the air, that the flowers and trees would nod to him, that the wild animals would come to him fearlessly. He parted two jackals that were fighting over the body of a smaller animal that they had killed and were feeding upon. When he approached them, they stopped fighting and put their heads in his outstretched hands in perfect trust, then resumed their meal in quiet. He even gave me one of the young wild creatures to hold in my hands. He then said to me, "This is not the mortal self, the self you see, that is able to do these things. It is a truer, deeper self. It is what you know as God, God within me, God the omnipotent, one working through me, that does these things. Of myself, the mortal self, I can do nothing. It is only when I get rid of the outer entirely and let the I am, speak and work, and let the great love of God come forth that I can do these things that you have seen. When you let the love of God pour through you to all things, nothing fears you and no harm can befall you. In his extensive work on the mystical manifestations of human nature, the German naturalist and philosopher Maximilian Purdy has devoted a whole chapter to the modern forms of magic. The manifestations of magical life, he says in his preface, partially repose on quite another order of things than the nature in which we are acquainted with: time, space, and causality. These manifestations can be experimented with but little. They cannot be called out at our bidding, but may be observed and carefully followed whenever they occur in our presence. We can only group them by analogy under certain divisions, and deduce from them general principles and laws. Thus, for Professor Purdy, who evidently belongs to the school of Schopenhauer, the possibility and naturalness of the phenomena which took place in the presence of Cavadanzami, the fakir, and are described by Louis Jacquelet, the Orientalists, are fully demonstrated in that principle. The fakir was a man who, through the entire subjugation of the matter of his corporal system, has attained to that state of purification at which the spirit becomes nearly freed from its prison, and can produce wonders. His will, nay, a simple desire of his, has become creative force, and he can command the elements and powers of nature. His body is no more an impediment to him, hence he can converse spirit to spirit, breath to breath. Under his extended palms a seed, unknown to him, for Jacquelet has chosen it at random among a variety of seeds from a bag and planted it himself, after marking it in a flower pot, will germinate instantly and push its way through the soil, developing in less than 2 hours' time to a size and height which perhaps under ordinary circumstances would require several days or weeks. It grows miraculously under the very eyes of the perplexed experimenter and mockingly upsets every accepted formula in botany. The Masters of the Far East, Volume 1, page 42. You need not fear. Does not God take care of all his creatures, both great and small? And are we not his creatures? You will see that here I have a few kernels of corn, or corn seed. I will plant them. By this act, I have definitely said that I want corn, and I have formed corn in my mind. I have fulfilled the law, and in due season it will come forth. Is it necessary for us to await the long, arduous process that nature in her slow growth and unfoldment will take in order to grow corn? If so, we would be obliged to wait a long, hard time to obtain it. Why not use a higher or more perfect law given us by the Father to produce it? All that is required is to become quiet and visualize or idealize corn, and we have corn cured, ready for use. If you doubt it, you can gather it, grind it into meal, then make it into bread. There before us was a corn grown and cured so we did gather it and grind it, and afterwards made it into bread. Is this a miracle? By no means. It may be one, perhaps, if we take Webster's definition, that a miracle is every event contrary to the established constitution and course of things, a deviation from the known laws of nature. But are our naturalists prepared to support the claim that they have once established on observation as infallible, or that every law of nature is known to them? In this instance, the quote-unquote miracle is but a little more prominent than the now well-known experiments of General Pleasanton of Philadelphia. While the vegetation and fruitage of his vines were stimulated on an incredible activity by the artificial violet light, the magnetic fluid emanating from the hands of the faker affected still more intense and rapid changes in the vital function of the Indian plants. It attracted and concentrated the akasa, or life principle, on the germ. His magnetism, obeying his will, drew up the akasa in a concentrated current through the plant towards his hands, and by keeping up an unintermittent flow for the requisite space of time, the life principle of the plant built up cell after cell, layer after layer, with preternatural activity until the work was done. The life principle is but a blind force obeying a controlling influence. In the ordinary course of nature, the plant protoplasm would have concentrated and directed it at a certain established rate. This rate would have been controlled by the prevalent atmospheric conditions, its growth being rapid or slow, and in stalk or head, in proportion to the amount of light, heat, and moisture of the season. But the faker, coming to the help of nature with his powerful will and spirit purified from the contact with matter, condenses, so to speak, the essence of plant life into its germ and forces it to maturity ahead of its time. This blind force, being totally submissive to his will, obeys it with servility. If he chose to imagine the plant as a monster, it would have surely become such, as ordinarily it would grow in its natural shape, for the concrete image, slave to the subjective model outlining the imagination of the faker, is forced to follow the original in its least detail, as the hand and brush of the painter follow the image which they copy from his mind. The will of the faker, conjurer, forms an invisible, but yet to it perfectly objective matrix, in which the vegetable matter is caused to deposit itself and assume the fixed shape. The will creates, for the will in motion is force, and force produces matter. If some persons object to the explanation on the ground that the faker could by no means create the model in his imagination, since he was kept ignorant by Jacqueline of the kind of seed he had selected for the experiment, to these we will answer that the spirit of man is like that of his creator, omniscient in its essence. While in his natural state, the faker did not and could not know whether it was a melon seed or a seed of any other plant. Once entranced, i.e., finally dead to all outward appearance, the spirit, for which there exists neither distance, material obstacle, nor space of time, experienced no difficulty in perceiving the melon seed, whether as it lay deeply buried in the mud of the flower pot or reflected in the faithful picture gallery of Jacquelette's brain. Our visions, portents, and other psychological phenomena, all of which exist in nature, are corroborative of the above fact. And now, perhaps, we might as well meet at once another impending objection. Indian jugglers, they will tell us, do the same. And, as well as the faker, if we can believe newspapers and travelers' narratives, undoubtedly so. And moreover, these strolling jugglers are neither pure in their modes of living nor considered holy by anyone, neither by foreigners nor their own people. They are generally feared and despised by the natives, for they are sorcerers, men practicing the black art. While such a holy man as Kavindasamy requires but the help of his own divine soul, closely united with he, astral spirit, and the help of a few familiar Petries, pure, ethereal beings who rally around their like brother in flesh. The sorcerer can summon to his help but that class of spirits which we know as the elementals. Like attracts like, and greed for money, impure purposes, and selfish views cannot attract any other spirits than those that the Hebrew Kabbalists know as the Klipoth, dwellers of Asia, the fourth world, and the Eastern magicians as the Afrits, or elementary spirits of error, or the Devs. This is how an English paper describes the astounding trick of plant growth as performed by Indian jugglers. An empty flower pot was now placed upon the floor by the juggler, who requested that his comrades might be allowed to bring up some garden mold from the little plot of ground below. Permission being accorded, the men went and in 2 minutes returned with a small quantity of fresh earth tied up in a corner of a shutter, which he deposited in the flower pot and lightly pressed down. Taking from his basket a dry mango stone and handing it round to the company that they might examine it and satisfy themselves that it was really what it seemed to be, the juggler scooped out a little earth from the center of the flower pot and placed the stone in the cavity. He then turned the earth lightly over it, and having poured a little water over the surface, shut the flower pot out of view by means of a sheet thrown over a small triangle. And now, amid a full chorus of voices and rat-tat-tat accompanied of the tabor, the stone germinated. Presently a section of the cloth was drawn aside and gave view the tender shoot, characterized by 2 long leaves of a blackish-brown color. The cloth was readjusted, and the incantation resumed. Not long was it, however, before the cloth was a second time drawn aside, and it was then seen that the 2 first leaves had given place to several green ones, and that the plant now stood 9 or 10 inches high. A third time, and the foliage was much thicker, the sapling being about 13 or 14 inches in height. A fourth time, and the little miniature tree, now about 18 inches in height, had 10 or 12 mangoes about the size of walnuts hanging about its branches. Finally, after the lapse of 3 or 4 minutes, the cloth was altogether removed, and the fruit, having the perfection of size, though not of maturity, was plucked and handed to the spectators, and, on being tasted, was found to be approaching ripeness, being sweetly acid. We may add to this that we have witnessed the same experiment in India and Tibet, and that more than once we provided the flower pot ourselves by emptying an old tin box of some Libby extracts. We filled it with earth and with our own hands and planted it in a small root handed to us by the conjurer, and until the experiment was ended, never once removed our eyes from the pot, which was placed in our room. The result was invariably the same as above described. Does the reader imagine that any prestidigitator could produce the same manifestation under the same conditions? The learned Orioli, corresponding member of the Institute of France, gives a number of instances which show the marvelous effects produced by the willpower acting upon the invisible Proteus of the mesmerists. I have seen, says he, certain persons who simply by pronouncing certain words arrest wild bulls and horses at headlong speed, and suspend in its flight the arrow which cleaves the air. Thomas Bartholini affirms the same. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. This is your host, Thomas Sandor Townsend, and for this segment of the video, we're going to go back to the previous video, Myth versus Reality 1, and discuss Marco Polo's book, The Travels, where he speaks of Brahmins and Yogis. Page 277. Let me tell you next of a province called Lar, which lies westward of the place where St. Thomas the Apostle is buried. From this province are sprung all the Brahmins in the world, and it is from here that they originate. I assure you that these Brahmins are among the best traders in the world and the most reliable. They would not tell a lie for anything in the world and do not utter a word that is not true. They eat no meat and drink no wine. They live very virtuous lives according to their own usage. They have no sexual intercourse except with their own wives. They take nothing that belongs to another. They would never kill a living creature or do any act that they believe to be sinful. These Brahmins are idolaters and set more store by augury and the behavior of beasts and birds than any other men in the world. These Brahmins live longer than anyone else in the world. This is due to their light feeding and great abstinence. They have very good teeth thanks to an herb they are accustomed to eat, which is a great aid to digestion and is very salutary to the human body. And you must know that these Brahmins do not practice phlebotomy or any other form of bloodletting. Among them, there are certain men living under a rule who are called yogis. They live even longer than the others, as much as 150 or 200 years, and their bodies remain so active that they can still come and go as they will and perform all the services required by their monastery and their idols and serve them just as well as if they were younger. This comes to their great abstinence and of eating very little food and only what is wholesome, for it is their practice to eat chiefly rice and milk. There is a regular religious order in this kingdom of Mabar of those who are called by the name of yogi, who carry an abstinence to the extremes of which I will tell you, and lead a harsh and austere life. You may take it for a fact that they go stark naked, wearing nothing, not a stitch of clothing, nor even covering their private parts or any bodily member. They do not eat out of a platter or in trench, but they take their food on the leaves of apples of paradise, or rather big leaves, not green leaves, but dried ones. For they say that green leaves have souls, so that this would be a sin, for in their dealings with all living creatures they are at pains to do nothing that they believe to be a sin. Indeed, they would sooner die than do anything that they deem to be sinful. When other men ask them why they go naked and are not ashamed to show their sexual member, they say, "We go naked because we want nothing of this world. For we came into this world naked and unclothed. The reason why we are not ashamed to show our member is that we commit no sin with it. So we are not more ashamed to show it than you are when you show your hand or your face or any other member which you do not employ in sinful lechery. That you cover it and are not ashamed of it. But we are no more ashamed of it than of our fingers, because we commit no sin with it." Such is the justification they offer to those who ask them why they are not ashamed of their nakedness. I assure you further that they would not kill any creature or any living thing in the world, neither a fly, nor flea, nor louse, nor any other vermin, because they say that they have souls. For the same reason they refuse to eat living things, because of the sin they would incur. I assure you that they do not eat anything fresh, either herb or root, until it is dried, because they declare that while they are fresh, they have souls. She insisted that it would be no trouble, so we moved in, bag and baggage, and made her home our home during the remainder of our stay. I shall never forget the first we met her. It was in a small town near the border. When she was introduced, we thought she was not a day over 18, and we all thought her beautiful. What was our surprise when we were told she was over 400 years old and one of the most beloved teachers. Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda, page 320. Shankari Maju, a yogini, woman yogi, disciple of Sharlanga Swami. She is shown here with three representatives from the YSS school in Ranchi at the Kumbh Mela in Ardwar in 1938. The Yogini was then 112 years old. The levitating saint. I saw a yogi remain in the air several feet above the ground last night at a group meeting. My friend Upendra Mahun Chaudhuri spoke impressively. I gave him an enthusiastic smile. Perhaps I can guess his name. Was it Baduri Mahasaya of Upper Circular Road? Upendra nodded, a little crestfallen not to be a news bearer. My inquisitiveness about saints was well known to my friends. They delighted in setting me on a fresh track. The yogi lives so close to my home that I often visit him. My words brought keen interest to Upendra's face, and I made a further confidence. I have seen him in remarkable feats. He has expertly mastered the various pranayamas mentioned in the ancient Eightfold Yoga outlined by Patanjali. Once Baduri Mahasaya performed the Bhastrika pranayama before me with such amazing force that it seemed an actual storm had arisen in the room. Then he extinguished the thundering breath and remained motionless in a high state of super consciousness. The aura of peace after the storm was vivid beyond forgetting.